Welcome to the LDA Podcast, a series by the Learning Disabilities Association of America. Our podcast is dedicated to exploring topics of interest to educators, individuals with learning disabilities, parents, and professionals to work towards our goal of creating a more equitable world. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the LDA Podcast. I'm here today with Jesse Sanchez, the Managing Director of Programs for the Neurodiversity Alliance, and he's going to tell us more about their program. So, Jesse, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I'm really excited to be here. We're a big fan of the podcast and LDA.
That's great. We're so excited to have you and to talk about the Neurodiversity Alliance and the great work that they are doing in schools. So to start us off, could you tell us a little bit about the Neurodiversity Alliance? What's your mission and how do you work towards achieving that mission?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the Neurodiversity Alliance, we are a national student organization. We have a network of student clubs across the country, and we connect neurodivergent students on their college and high school campuses primarily to build community, to reduce stigma, to develop social emotional learning skills that are critically important for neurodivergent students, and also to go out into their communities and make an impact. There's a number of ways we do that. Sometimes it's by having our students go to local middle schools where they actually do our art-based group mentoring program for younger neurodivergent students. We also have a number of national leadership roles where we're supporting our neurodivergent students in really developing their leadership skills, which is also supporting them long-term in terms of their transition from college to career. They can serve on our National Student Advisory Council. They can be public speaking ambassadors, work on social media, and get involved with our incredible alumni group.
That's all fantastic. So how many Neurodiversity Alliance clubs are currently active around the country?
This fall, right now, we're around 90 clubs, which we're really excited about. And about a third of those 90 clubs are actually have formal arrangements with us and with a local school to go and do our youth mentoring program at local middle schools. So those are typically either a mixture of either a high school or a college club going to a local middle school to mentor younger neurodivergent students.
It's fantastic. So can we talk a little bit broader about what are some of the challenges that neurodiverse students can face among their neurotypical peers and also in their just day-to-day routines?
Sure. So I know this audience is, if you're listening, you're probably very familiar with learning disabilities and the learning differences and the various different kinds of day-to-day challenges, depending upon that student or your own kind of label or diagnosis or neurotype. But one of the things that comes up for me that we see the most in terms of neurodivergent students struggling with their peers is just social issues. Whether it's feeling like they don't belong, feeling like maybe even experiencing bullying, or just being kind of othered and not fully brought into the fold with their peers because maybe they're struggling with, one, their self-esteem, or two, maybe it's even like emotional outbursts and struggling with emotional regulation. I think of an example, actually. One of our sites, one of our clubs, we have a mentor, a young college man. He's actually a student athlete. Big, he's a very big, boisterous, active ADHDer, kind of like myself, ADHDer. And he, in the last year, started mentoring a young boy at a local middle school through our program who also has ADHD. And one of the things I've learned from our stakeholders teacher, who's actually facilitating the chapter there for us, and she says that, this particular student, he is known as to be a very lovable, kind middle schooler. But he has a whirlwind of energy. He's probably struggles with dyspraxia as well. He's very, kind of clumsy, tends to get into trouble. And he's had a lot of issues with emotional outbursts in the last couple of years. And so that's really impacted his experience in terms of his day-to-day, his experience in the classroom, his experience with his peers. But in this last year, partnering with his mentor, who, I think they're kind of kindred spirits, which we're pretty good at kind of matchmaking those kind of kindred spirits of neurodivergent, near peer mentors with mentees. That's what we do. it's just made a huge difference for him. Um, the teacher who we partner with was telling us a story around how the student who in prior years would be running around the classroom, having a lot of difficulty participating with this particular mentor, she looked back one day in the art room setting, which is the group environment that we do our mentoring in, and they were sitting under a table together, just feverishly focused on their art project, and near the back of the classroom, where they just kind of buddied up and quieted down and created this like fort environment. And it just goes to show that a lot of these typical challenges, whether it's social, relationship with peers, emotional regulation, this has made a lasting shift in this student, having this older mentor who's also, a fellow ADHD, or just building a bond in a relationship and creating the flexible, way of working together, even if that means we're not sitting at a table, but we're sitting underneath one over, at the end of the classroom by ourselves.
Absolutely. Well, and you touched on this a little bit, but why is it so important to have a supportive community for neurodiverse students, and especially the mentorship aspect too? It's really huge.
Yeah. Supportive communities for neurodivergent folks are wildly critical. And also, let me just say, as I'm speaking about all of this, Lauren, I just want to share that, like, I speak about this as someone myself who has ADHD and visual processing disorder. And that's, I have had my own experience from, like, middle school up to now being an adult, and, having, up until more recently spent 10 years working in technology. There's all these challenges, and the saving grace for me has been community, and it has been for so much of our students. Oftentimes, teachers, almost by virtue of their job, like, it's hard for them to not hone in on and make visible, what students can't do or where they're falling behind, right? It's their job to try to, like, have students achieve in the classroom. But rarely, not often enough, do those same students have a supportive community where they can hone in on what they can do and do really well, whether it's in the classroom or outside of the classroom. And that's just critical because, one of the things we're really focused on in our curriculum and our programming is to help these students develop confidence, self-esteem, and self-efficacy. And when you're not a neurotypical learner, it's easy to get beat down, right, in a traditional learning environment. So another story comes to mind for me, by getting these students out of the classroom and into a supportive community, they're able to, maybe for the first time, start to have a conversation with someone around what they're really good at and why that's important. One of our mentors was working with a young 8th grader in recent years, and this young girl, she was described to me as being particularly shy and quiet, and the mentor was working with her on a project around just goal setting. That was the competency for this art project. Let's talk about setting goals. And so the mentor asked this mentee, this was an older college student who also had similar learning disabilities, who was also dyslexic. This particular mentee was also was dyslexic. She said, well, let's think about some long-term goals. Say, for example, graduating high school, right? That's like kind of 5 years out for you. And right away, her mentee looked at her and she said, oh, I'm not graduating high school. She was like very heavy, shoulders dropped, and she was like, had such conviction in her voice. Very matter of fact, I can't conceivably imagine myself graduating high school. And so her mentor said to her, she's like, well, why is that? And her mentee just shot right back at her, I can't read. I just can't read. And so her mentor, dug in a little bit and was supportive. And she said, well, I understand you're not feeling confident about graduating high school because you can't read. Let's think about other goals, long-term goals. And I know you love music. This particular mentee, this 8th grade girl, was really passionate about music and very talented at the cello. Her mentor had learned. And she said, how do you how do you play the cello? And she says, oh, I use the instrument. Okay. The mentor said, and she said, well, um, how do you go about like making music and, understanding like what notes to play? And she goes, I read the notes, right? I read the music. And the mentor said to her, so you can read actually. You can read music. Um, and the mentee instantly like looked at her, her energy shifted, her eyes opened um wide, her face lit up, and she was like, oh yeah. No one had ever kind of focused on that for her. The idea that she can read, she can do something well, that she and excel in something that she really loves and is passionate about. And that was just like the first moment of, building up that some brick of self-esteem and self-efficacy, which really shifted that student, um, and kind of propelled her in their relationship in that supportive community. So having these supportive communities, where neurodivergent folks are getting together is super critical. There's also just a bond that's so hard to replicate, when you've gone through this lived experience yourself. The normalizing experience is so powerful, and I can relate to that from my own experience, you know, with my involvement finding the Neurodiversity Alliance for the first time when I was a college student, and was really deeply struggling. So yeah.
No, that's huge. I mean, focusing on strengths is so important for students who are often, told all of the things that they can't do well. So it's so huge to have that supportive community who's able to have that lived experience, that shared lived experience, and to help to point these things out to them. So a little bit more on that note is, why is it so important for neurodiverse students to develop these self-confidence and self-advocacy skills? And what are some ways that they can develop these skills?
Hmm. Yeah. This is a core pillar of what we've always been focused on in our organization, is helping students understand, creating a space and community where they can understand more about their own learning and performance kind of needs and styles, so that they can identify and the accommodations that would best help them. And most importantly, where the rubber hits the road, they got to ask for them in order to get them. Right. Self-advocacy has been huge. A lot of students, especially as we're just talking about students who may be struggling with self-esteem, or self-worth. Sometimes there's like an assertiveness that's underdeveloped, that is really important for them to be able to get access to the accommodation so that they can demonstrate their abilities. So self-advocacy is super critical. And some of the ways that we help students develop those skills, is through our curriculum, and also through the near peer mentoring. To be able to, I'll share my own story now. Here's the importance of self-advocacy skills. For me, as someone who was Chicano, Latino, first in my family to graduate from high school, neurodivergent, when I transferred to my four-year university and I moved away from home for the first time, and like a lot of freshmen in college, do, a lot of my scaffolding and support that helped me be successful up to that point all went away. And I needed to learn for the first time a couple things. Really needed to relearn the criticality of my accommodations, and I needed to have the desire, the motivation, and the skills to self-advocate to use those accommodations. Going away to college, I actually had no one had ever told me, Lauren, that I had ADHD, that I had learning differences, even though I had gone through a pretty good, public K through 12 system where I received accommodations and had an IEP. The entire social emotional development component was totally missing and lacking, just general awareness, right? And particularly for college students, you know, this is a time where if you're going to use accommodations, it's on you. You need to actually go to your disability service center. You need to make arrangements for yourself. There's no hand holding that happens in the from the K through 12 system. But even more so, because the neurodivergent identity formation was so lacking, the conversation was so lacking in my life. And as a young adult, I was very much exploring um, what am I capable of? I transferred to a very competitive university in California, UC Berkeley. And in that competitive environment with my peers, I kind of wondered, like, if I, especially as a first generation student, if I deserve to be here, why am I using these accommodations? Should I be using these accommodations? There's almost like an internalized stigma around them because the social emotional component had never been discussed or developed within in me. And so my second semester at Cal, I actually decided on my own volition that I would distance myself from the Disability Resource Center. I would not use any accommodations. And it came from this internalized place of neurodivergent stigma, of lack of awareness that a lot of folks struggle with. And it was this idea of, I should be able to do this without these special accommodations. Now, let me just tell you what the result of that was. Very quickly, my grades plummeted. Very quickly, in association with that, my anxiety skyrocketed, right? And that persisted long enough to start to grow into depression. And this is not an uncommon pattern that we see for neurodivergent students. Their learning disability is kind of it's the origin or fountain point for a lot of difficulty with mental health, which we know Gen Z is absolutely struggling with. It's a huge crisis in our society right now. And during that semester, I happened to get an email from my disability service office about the opportunity to start a chapter of the Neurodiversity Alliance with its Eye to Eye youth mentoring program associated with the Indie Alliance. And I thought, I probably need this as much as these younger students in the Berkeley community we'd be mentoring would benefit from this. I need this, right? I need to engage with community, explore my neurodivergent identity. And that set me on this journey of deciding to go on my own volition and ask for accommodations, re-engage with my disability resource center, leverage all the resources that were available to me, having them introduce me to our university health center on campus, where I was able to do my first basically young adult clinical diagnostic experience for ADHD. And to go through that experience at the same time that I had been building a community of peers on campus who were going through the same thing. And we were getting off of our bubble and out into the community to help younger people. It was really the magic that I think gave me, honestly, a pride around self-advocating. And hone those skills by forcing me to teach others how to do them and why they were important.
Absolutely. So it sounds like a lot of self-knowledge is what eventually led to your self-advocacy and your self-confidence.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say it's definitely that self-knowledge combined with being around other people who have the same lived experience and normalizing that it's that with one another. Normalizing that it's okay to use accommodations, normalizing that it's okay to have ADHD, normalizing that all of that is true. And yes, we belong here, on our college campus together. We belong here in these leadership roles as young students impacting our community.
Absolutely. Well, I'm so grateful that you shared your story as well. That internal stigma about accessing accommodations in college is so common. A lot of students just going to college for the first time won't even disclose a learning disability. So I think we really just need to give them credit where credit is due, that it's difficult to ask for accommodations, but it doesn't make you any less deserving of being on campus. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about the Neurodiversity Alliance. Could you tell us a little bit about what a typical club meeting or gathering looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really it varies so much from club to club around the country. We have a chapter this year that is at a very large community college in Texas with 75 students. We have chapter at a local public high school. And the beautiful thing about our clubs is they're student run, right? We provide a platform. We provide a lot of resources and digital toolkits and flyers and virtual events for all these students, but it's an opportunity for them to really own and build their own community that's relevant at their local level. What it looks like at a high school in Texas is very different than maybe what it looks like at on campus at Yale, for example. Some typical events, though, are things like students doing panels together to raise awareness in their local community on their campus for neurodivergent students. They may be speaking to a group of parents, teachers, and fellow peers. Maybe that later that year they're doing a film screening together and they're just sitting together and they're having an ice cream social, as part of that. Or they're tabling on campus and handing out buttons that say, like ADHD proud to be, or proud dyslexic thinker. And they're, opening up that conversation for other students on their campus to self-identify and wear that as a badge of honor on their hoodie or on their backpack. These awareness raising campaigns are something that we organize 3 times a year. Actually, coming up in October in a week, we're kicking off our Strike Out Stigma campaign as part of the LD Awareness Month. So we're handing out toolkits to all of our students right now to do that. Sometimes students are just getting together and doing study groups, on a college campus.
That's great. It's great that it's student run and that it can really be what the school community needs. It's able to be adapted that way. So what are some examples of a Neurodiversity Alliance club making an impact on its school?
Yeah, happy to share. One example, I mean, it can vary so much. It could be as small as I'm thinking of, we have a student, because one of the programs that we have that our clubs can do is to go into their local community and to mentor local middle school students. We're now, having been around for actually 25 years, Lauren, we have some like middle school mentees with learning disability differences who are now in college and are actually starting clubs on their college campus, and really bringing it full circle and transforming a campus environment where there's maybe minimal to no disability services or awareness on campus, and they're bringing that from the ground up. We're putting out these change makers. Many years ago, we had a club at a liberal arts college in upstate New York, where the student leaders, they actually had the disability resource office facility relocated so that it was no longer off campus, away from their class buildings and their student center, and relocated onto the center of campus by advocating to their administration, and organizing themselves and articulating how important it was and how it made them feel to basically be symbolically and oftentimes pushed out of the outskirts of their campus community when it was time for them to go and get resources and services.
Wow, that's so huge because it's already so hard to ask for accommodations. So that's such a huge and important impact. And it has to be so cool to see the full circle effect of the middle school students turning around, becoming advocates, becoming mentors, starting their own clubs. That has to be really fulfilling.
That is particularly special. And, um, it really doesn't end. This organization, now that we're 25 years, we're at a point where we're actually making inroads in supporting students with learning disabilities and who are neurodivergent almost like through the entire life cycle, right? From
Mhm.
being a middle schooler who's having their life transformed by a mentor in their after school art room program, to being a high schooler who is starting an ND Alliance club. And one of our students actually um, was able to um, advocate at the superintendent level for their entire district, because of the discrimination that they experience on their campus, to have ND Alliance clubs brought to all the high schools in that district, to a college student who's studying special education, and starting an ND Alliance club, mentoring middle school students, and then graduating to go on and be a special educator. Or we have one student now who is um, he's like the superintendent for uh, all of the KIPP Charter School Network in Washington, D.C. And so with these alumni, we're now helping, someone who may have started out as a middle schooler and is now getting support in, having a thriving career because of the alumni base that we've developed.
That's fantastic. Well, and as we know, learning disabilities and ADHD, they stay with you throughout your life. They're lifelong. So it's great that the Neurodiversity Alliance has support in different stages for each step of the way. The last question I wanted to ask is for listeners who are tuning in and wondering how they can start their own club or how they can get involved, what would you say to them?
We would love to have you get involved. We would love to support you. Please check us out at thendalliance.org. Check out our website. There is an opportunity for you to fill out a contact us form, whether you are a student, whether you are an educator, whether you are a parent. You can get connected with us on our website, and we would actually have someone be able to talk about what the best pathway is for you to get involved. And you can also follow us on all of our social media platforms, including LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. And we actually are now developing our own niche online community and mobile app. And so if you go to our website, you join our community, you'll get an automated email. If you click on that email, it will allow you to log into our download our mobile app and join our online community. So you can actually have a safe space just focused for a neurodivergent community.
Well, that's very exciting. And we are so happy to have you on and to highlight the great work that the Neurodiversity Alliance is doing. So, Jesse, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you, Lauren. It's a joy, and we appreciate all the work that you're doing at LDA, and hope to be back on again.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to the LDA podcast. To learn more about LDA and to get valuable resources and support, visit ldaamerica.org.